All right, everyone, we're going to get started with our final presentation for today. Thanks again for joining us in the All Lines Technology Tech Talk breakout session. Again, with respect to time, you can see us in the back of the room if you have additional questions about who All Lines Technology is. I'll be here for the rest of the afternoon. But most importantly, I want to introduce our next speakers from Savvior, Mr. Christopher Evans.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to see us here late in the day. Always mindful that we're the last ones between you and cocktails. We'll try to keep it really interesting and impactful. Really thrilled to be able to talk with you guys today about a very important problem that exists for a lot of companies, a lot of industries. We're talking about knowledge management. And we're actually going to demonstrate, hopefully, the way that our good friends at Arconic, formerly Alcoa, have been solving some of their knowledge management challenges through a product that we have built. And we'll show you how we're kind of taking it to market as well. So just briefly, and may I also introduce my colleague, our Chief Technology Officer and a partner in the company, Nick Ledoux. In case you get any really great tech questions, I brought the heavy brass, right? So who's Savvior? First off, pays to know a few things about us. We jokingly call ourselves SEAL Team 6, with a lot of deference to the obvious mission that those guys have. We're kind of SEAL Team 6 for businesses. We come into organizations and solve business problems by building tactical solutions or bringing forward tactical solutions that we've built for other industries and build bridges between business units and the CIO, the IT team, and those business units. Why is there a need for a company like us with all the world's great software companies out there? Well, it's been our experience over the past 20 years that even the best point solutions and large enterprise packages sometimes leave chasms that exist in the business, which force employees to do workarounds, like living in spreadsheets and manual processes. Highly inefficient, not secure, a major issue. Other times, the problems that we tend to help solve need an amalgamation of things we can build or have built and the great systems that are already in place. For example, you'll recognize a lot of these great logos here, some of the world's finest enterprise packaged software companies. Our goal in life isn't to rip those systems out when we come in and work with companies like Arconic, but to help them do more with the investments they've already made with these products through the solutions that we build, again, acting as a bridge. We're based here in Pittsburgh. We've been around 20 years, and we're comprised of application engineers and project management talent and UX talent. I jokingly like to say that we're a bunch of high-end nerds that solve a lot of these major problems. And we're located above the Penn Brewery on the north side. If those of you are familiar with the brewery, it's kind of a cool place to write software as well. I wasn't exaggerating when I said we do work for some of the world's most important companies. But through a lot of the frameworks that we develop, we're also able to serve small and mid-sized businesses and emerging market companies too. And we tend to win a lot of awards and get recognized by our friends at the Tech Council and other national affiliations for the work we do. So enough about us. Let's talk about knowledge management. Let's talk about it as a problem, why it exists, and what companies are doing about it. Certainly not a new concept, right? Is it knowledge mastery? Since the late 1990s, there have been a lot of studies of how software can help attack components of knowledge management. But heretofore, and frankly, we think prior to Alcoa embarking on this initiative, it hadn't been done on such a grand scale and hasn't been solved and addressed on such a grand scale as what we believe we've been able to bring forward for them. Why is it important? Well, when you talk to the C-suite, you talk to the CEO of any major corporation, they're going to talk to you about identifying colleagues within the organization that have relevant experience. Think about onboarding a brand new employee, for example, or a team of employees. How can we erase the gap that exists between people who've been in the business 25 years? Who among us who hasn't worked in a large company, hasn't heard in the halls? Call Peg. Peg knows where that information exists. Or, gosh, I think it's the guys down in Texas would know. Next thing you know, you've got employees making phone calls all across the country trying to find out information, hugely inefficient. What else happens when you have people retiring or staff attrition? That knowledge dissipates. It's a huge problem. So you have to have the combination of the right tools and strategy and collaboration in order to address knowledge management at a very high level. When you talk about having total visibility across a large enterprise, think of the myriad of systems we're talking about. In the case of Alcoa, which we'll show you, there were actually 7 different ERP systems that had to be connected to and leveraged. Our friends down at US Steel tell me if we're able to work with them, they've got 62. Pretty frightening when you think about the magnitude of data that you're dealing with. So why it's such a big problem is inefficiency for organizations. You end up wasting the opportunity of collaboration that could exist. And you're spending a lot of money and you're spending a lot of time. You also have siloed information, information that lives only within the minds or emails of certain group members. Hugely inefficient, certainly not scalable, and costs a lot of money. Also, studies are showing that the next generation of workers, the millennial workforce, is accustomed to, demands, and wants online collaboration tools. That's pretty difficult when you think about the cultural challenges of a very large global multinational corporation pivoting almost overnight in one generation's time to be able to provide this kind of systems. A lot of times when you don't have total visibility, the investments that are made in point solutions aren't fully realized. And you end up having certain pockets of efficiency, not unlike heating or cooling a house when you've got hot or cold pockets, but certainly not across the entire organization. Think for a moment the compounding problem that this becomes when you start injecting mergers and acquisitions into the mix, as many of the kind of companies we're talking about tend to do. Now you've got disparate systems, disparate teams, disparate companies, disparate cultures, all trying to come together at one. If anyone here is in the room is in the marketing department or CMO, you'll know the nightmare that becomes from a mismatching brand standard problem as well. Lots of studies exist about this problem across pretty much every industry, and certainly information we can provide to you after today's presentation. We at Savvior are making the case on this for canned custom as a solution to this. What we mean by that is we've observed that no two organizations are exactly alike, even in the same industries, even in similar industries. But a lot of the problems that they face are alike. A lot of these off-the-shelf products that tend to address one or two elements of knowledge management tend not to fulfill the entire need that the business has to attack it. And again, if you've ever been around some of these large companies, and many of you have clients who are those kind of companies or work within them, you know when you hear about people relying on spreadsheets and data, it's a huge problem, and data silos. An employee could walk off with some of the most mission-critical information or knowledge. So, we've solved that problem with OmniView Knowledge Management System. Who here in the room remembers when Alcoa decided to split just about 2 years ago? Yeah, almost all of you. Pretty big news. They had been wrestling with knowledge management for over 20 years prior to announcing that they wanted to split. But what they realized was the physical limitations of splitting a company of that size, of that scale and scope, and even legally being able to know where all the intellectual property would go. So they had talked with organizations like our good friends at Google about this problem, and were only able to get a modicum of the problem solved, in that case, just search. But what we're about to show you isn't search alone. It's a combination of different technologies and different aspects that enable us to actually call this knowledge mastery, not just knowledge management. Think about 500,000 technical records being separated. That's pretty amazing. And again, we already said 7 different ERP systems. Some of these systems only in use at certain divisions around the globe. They also challenged themselves. They said, could we not only find a solution to split the company, but to reinvent how all projects are entered on site so we never repeat these problems? And the next 20 years of both Alcoa and the newly named Arconic would be able to function seamlessly with the onboarding capabilities we talked about for the next generation of workforce, reducing that attrition of information that would be gone when staff leaves, and solving this problem. This is a typical example of what we found when we got there. The organization has many, many systems. And by the way, this isn't specific to Arconic. This could be any large organization. You ask our friends in IT how it all works. Hey, everything's connected. All the different departments are getting all the information they need. No problem here, nothing to see here. We all know that that's not reality. Sometimes you have systems that are on life support. You have other systems that only a few people know how to leverage, know how to use. It certainly isn't across the board, and that was the case also at Arconic. Our team came in and leveraged a process that we call Savvy Track to discover what would be possible, and then to help scope and phase this, because as you can imagine, you don't just roll in with a global rollout of a system like this that hasn't even been defined very easily, let alone when you're under the clock of splitting a company in under 6 months' time. And what we were able to create for the company and now are taking to market around the globe is the most secure and searchable software environment that allows for total transparency into any organization. Remember a couple moments ago I mentioned that it's not just search? Once you're able to search, what do you do with the information? How about enterprise reporting on those findings? We laid in software algorithms, machine learning, to be able to help make business decisions. For example, can you identify the difference to a 98% accuracy of two individuals in the company that have very similar backgrounds and profiles? And can we determine which of those experts we would want to talk to about a given subject? Just one example of how they use it. And then allow the entire staff to contribute in a Wikipedia-like form so that it's living and breathing and it's real time. All within one single role-based auditing and compliance system and with existing staff and systems. In other words, we go away after we've built the product, and they maintain the system evermore. And that's really what it is. The beautiful thing about the way the system has been designed, and we owe a lot of credit to Nick and his team behind me, is that it's also very modular. If a company has one or more of these elements already being addressed by some of the good point solutions that we talked about, so be it. OmniView can be pulled apart like the layers of a cake and added onto. Not necessarily a replacement, but an umbrella that can do more with what you already have in place. Pretty impressive value proposition. If you had to define it, we would call it a centralized repository of information. The right-brain sales guy in the room would tell you it's Wikipedia on steroids. But Alcoa and Arconic would describe it as a collection, retention, management, user discovery system of the most important records in the company. And an intuitive collaboration system that connects back into all their mission-critical systems. It's a world-class architecture. Hidden benefit was we were able to consolidate some systems that weren't widely used or leveraged to their full capacity. So there were some operational efficiencies realized, which in a lot of these big companies is very important when it's a one-to-one. Can we reduce, not just spend new capital to solve these problems? The executive management team utilized this and utilizes it very effectively to assign assets to each of the two entities. And the project management tool is now used as a powerful leadership decision-making tool. Best of breed deployment, and it's highly flexible as well. Each of the functions that you'll see here are built in. Threat identification is another very interesting opportunity for companies that choose to leverage the system, being able to track who's looking at what and restricting access wherever appropriate. This is an actual example of the UX. One of the challenges that often we find as an opportunity at Savvior is sometimes packaged companies don't give you a whole lot of flexibility when it comes to the user experience. But our DNA is custom. For Arconic, we had to design a system that could be equally utilized and willingly utilized by 62-year-old highly technical engineers and 22-year-old interns. So the UI is something that we put a lot of emphasis on and can customize for any customer to follow. Built on world-class software, very important to note, we didn't start from scratch. Sometimes when you hear custom, it sounds like you are starting from scratch, but I said canned custom a little while ago. We were able to bring forward a system that we've had in use for many, many years and couple it with 13 other technologies to build the system that you see in front of you today. This is our content management system that's one of the major underpinnings of the system in use at important places all across the globe. Who might use the system in future iterations? Anybody in the C-level, anybody here represented there? And there are a lot of other interesting things that it can be utilized as, including for language translation, as well as enterprise reporting. There's some really cool things that we won't have time to talk about today, but happy to talk about offline, like the gamification features to get users jazzed and excited to utilize the system. 100% of all projects are entered into this system at Arconic today. And there are different buying decisions. One organization might be very excited about the machine learning decision capabilities of the system, where someone else has come to us and said, hey, we're all about just the expert identification. So modular, informed, flexible in nature. We're currently in beta with our friends from CGI, one of the major sponsors of today's presentation. We're hoping that they take this into consideration as well, as about 4 other major global companies have. Again, demonstrated here, just very flexible UI. And we've gotten some nice press on the system of late. In a nutshell, that's what it looks like if you only have one slide to describe it. Who cares about it? What can it do, and what can it connect to? I think we still have some time for questions about it, but that's OmniView. 3 minutes, great. And by all means, if there are any of a technical nature, please fire away, because I brought, like I said, the heavy brass. If any of the sub-areas that we talked about are of interest and you'd like to see a drill down of this, for example, show me how they're using it as a collaboration system. We will be happy to do offline demos of all of this. Any questions about OmniView or how Arconic is using it? All right, well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.